see the weaponization of AI as inevitable. Within a year or so, we're going to see GPT be given memory, logic, scientific knowledge. So we'll see another revolution when the IQ gap really closes. People will take sides. We'll see more and more Terrans taking a stance. That will mean arsons, assassination of brain architects. If I choose Cosmist, that means I accept the idea that humanity gets wiped out. So to a Terran, that makes me vermin, to be exterminated. This species dominance issue is the most important phenomenon that will occur in global politics this century. Sooner or later, humanity has to decide, right? It's a binary decision. We build them or we don't build them. Once they reach human-level intelligence, they can redesign themselves. So they have the intelligence to do that. And then those super creatures could redesign themselves and create super-duper creatures and so on.
You know, there's a lot of people who are concerned at this point about how this is going to be weaponized by nation states. I can't help but wonder how this is currently motivating the move towards conflict, especially surrounding the Taiwan Strait, where so much of the chip manufacturing potential, like the hardware, is created. How do you foresee, or have you thought much about how AI is going to be weaponized in the context of modern warfare? Like, is that just going to be deep fakes and misinformation, and is it just going to be part of the propaganda campaign, or is there going to be a cyber component to this, cyber attack, cyber security?
All of the above.
Autonomous weapons or systems, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, God, how many researchers and developers are there in AI? Probably 100 million, maybe over 1 million. I don't know, probably at least hundreds of thousands. So, there's all kinds of projects going on. That's not a joke when I say all of the above. All those things that you mentioned, probably will occur in parallel. So it's predicting the future is extremely complicated. I see the weaponization of AI as inevitable. I was saying a bit before, about the Minister of Defense of America and China. They won't allow each other to get ahead. The Chinese are very smart. They copy well. Talking about Taiwan. So imagine the Chinese do attack and conquer Taiwan. They just bring Taiwan back to the mainland, in a sense. So that's one of the major aims of Xi Jinping. It's like his historical destiny, in a sense. So it may very well happen. So then what happens to the most advanced chips, that industry? What happens? I'm not too worried about it. To me, it's just a bit of a glitch because I have such a faith, maybe that's the wrong word, belief, I guess, in America's creativity. I see America as far and away the most creative culture on the planet. It just drives history. It's the innovative scientific engine room that pulls the rest of the world along with it. If the advanced chip industry in Taiwan is destroyed, because the Chinese, their own industry is nowhere near that standard. So if America loses it, then in a couple of years they've caught up. To me, it's just a glitch. It won't change things much, because for a start, if America does lose it, then the US government will pour money into research. We've got to catch up, get back there. And I'm not an expert in this field because it's very detailed, but I do read that a lot of the designing of these super chips in Taiwan comes from America. So there is a modicum of real expertise in the US, but people do say the actual chips tend to be the most performant ones, the best are coming out of Taiwan. That to me is just a glitch. I'm not too concerned about that.
And what about your differences in opinion between other AI researchers, like your former colleague Ben Goertzel and Ray Kurzweil? They seem to have a more optimistic take on things. Kurzweil in particular is very utopian in his predictions, as Gertzel is maybe a bit more cautious based on what I've seen, but he still seems, he doesn't maybe have the same conviction that there's going to be this major conflict. Why do you think you guys differ in the way that you do?
Okay, so personalities, I'd say, is probably the dominant factor. We were saying a bit before, the intellect of sociology. I see this being a vast sub-branch of sociology, because there's so many different groups of people that you could correlate, Chair and Cosmos with. So amongst the intelligists, as I call them, the AI researchers and professors and so on, their different views, what does that correlate with? Certain personality type, or their history, or like in my case, I think you saw the Brian Rose London Real interview he did of me. So I was explaining when I was 20, what was going on. Given my age, what was going on then was the Vietnam War. I got, by the Australian government, I got conscripted to go to that war. I mean, the political slogan at the time was "all the way with LBJ," President Johnson. Mm-hmm. And so the Australian politicians at the time were fearful that if China or whoever invaded Australia or nuked Australia, Australia would be just helpless if it weren't for the nuclear umbrella of America. So the Australian politicians were very keen to sort of pass the message to Washington that Australia is on board, on their side. So they decided to conscript 20-year-old Australian males who at that time did not have the vote. That came in after, in fact, as a result of the Vietnam War. So here I was, 20, conscripted to go to a war that I didn't believe in. I mean, I'd read that these Vietnamese peasants, they were paying 70% of their crop to the landlord. So, of course, they loved communism, which freed them from all that. So, I was very cynical. I didn't want any part of this damn war where these politicians are risking my life to defend their ideology that I did not believe in. So I would go walking around the cemetery that's near the university I was at the time, that's Melbourne University, at night, in paranoid rages, imagining lobbing grenades into the parliament and killing as many of these people. It just transformed my personality. It made me bitter. And I suspect quite strongly that experience, that horror in a sense, that I think it's coloured my personality for the rest of my life. And can't be certain, but I suspect that's the case. So also Americans are much more optimistic, I think, than Europeans for several reasons. The Europeans in their own, older people, within their own life histories, had been through horrors, the Second World War, 50, 100 million people killed, whereas Americans, their last, it's not even major. I mean, the US Civil War in the 1860s involved, 6 states? It was rather small beer. Maybe, 600,000 soldiers got killed in the US Civil War. That's small beer compared to World War I and World War II, which was mostly in Europe. So Europeans on the whole, I do notice, because I've lived in Europe 20-odd years, and I've lived in America. I've lived in
7
countries. So Australia, England, Holland, Belgium, Japan, America, China, in that order. So I do think Europeans are more pessimistic, just by nature and their life experience. Americans are more optimistic. I think to become an American, to genetically filter yourself to become an American, you would have to be much more individualist and optimistic. Because what are you doing? In the 1800s and so on, all these migrants going to America, you'd have to be optimistic, believing that your life would be better, you'd have a better life, you would probably need to be a bit more selfish than usual, because what are you doing? You're uprooting yourself from your culture, your family, your friends, and so on, and going to an unknown place, the other side of the earth kind of thing. So Americans, I find, just from my own observation, are much more optimistic. So I think, Ben's an American, so that would be partly relevant to him. I've had 20 years in Europe. I got conscripted. So, I think personality and personal history plays a role in, just whether you're more Terran or cosmist. So, it's a complicated business. So I can imagine psychologists, not just sociologists, but psychologists getting into this question as well. I mean, it's psychological, it's sociological, it's political, it's technical, it's science. It's a huge field. It's huge.
Yeah, there definitely seems. I mean, I'll say that maybe the individualism and like that striving to have a boundless possibilities that comes with American exceptionalist mindset. There's also the fundamentalist sect in the States, which is very kind of hardline, cynical, and doomsday, anticipating like the prepper really is a American creation in a lot of ways. It's kind of a mixed bag, but in general, I could see how like the collective trauma experience in Europe, Russia in particular, would drive people to be more pessimistic about these outcomes. I give you a hard question here. Maybe we can kind of start to wrap it up with this. Is how much time do you think we have left before we see artificial general intelligence?
Well, saying early on in the interview, I thought that it would very probably occur before the end of this century. And then along came ChatGPT, so I've now more or less halved the time. So my time frame now is 10, 15, 20, that kind of time frame. Within a year or so, we're going to see GPT be given memory, logic, scientific knowledge, ability to think scientifically, and so forth. So we'll see another revolution in just a year or two. Ray Kurzweil's prediction of 2029, which is only if you think about it, it's only a mere 6 years away. It's not so far away. So he may end up being right. On the other hand, if it's a necessary condition to understand how the brain works, that's such a huge problem that it may be decades. Really capable GPTs, version 6, 7, 8, and so on. That's on the cards. That I do see happening in within this decade. That I see as highly likely. I think it was 2015. So 8 years ago, Ben and I got invited to talk to a group in China, I think in Shanghai. And in that talk, I said to Ben, 5 years. Now I got it wrong, but it's a quantitative error. I don't think it's a qualitative error. But I then said, well, maybe it was 10. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to go back and look at the video. But I said, Ben, sooner or later, you're going to have to be much more vigilant and careful about your security, because you're a highly visible target for the Terrans. When the IQ gap really closes, people will take sides. There'll be political parties formed and all that kind of thing. And you're a target. So I'm predicting within 5 years or so from now, 2023, that we'll see more and more Terrans taking a stance. And in practice, in concrete terms, that will mean arsons, assassination of brain architects, killings of CEOs of brain builder companies, AI companies. We will see the Terrans manifesting themselves to an increasing extent. And my prediction is plus minus 5 years from now. So Ben was my best friend for a couple of decades. So I would say, Ben, be careful. And say that to Altman and Bill Gates and all those types, because as Terrans come out of the woodwork, these guys are vulnerable. And I wouldn't be at all surprised. Within 5 years, we will hear a news report that Professor Dr. X, prominent brain builder wherever, was shot dead last night. That kind of thing. I see that coming. That's the beginning of the Arctic War as passions rise.
Interesting. Yeah, I think one of the difficult things in this situation is, I was just reading a quote here by Einstein about compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. And this understanding of like the logarithmic function and the takeoff, I like that you're conservative in your predictions, because as I've said before, many people are maybe a bit too near term in a lot of their predictions. But like you said, we don't know what the outcome of ChatGPT-5, and we don't know if there's going to be some exponential, occurrence in just the next few years that might, bring these predictions a lot closer. To be realistic, yeah, I think you're right. Possibly 10 to 20 years, especially in light of current geopolitical tensions impacting supply chains and that in itself, and the energy crisis and things of that nature, complicating the development of these big brains. But, there is some potential for some AI eureka moment, and it's interesting that you say that. Is there anything else that you are you conscious that, in a sense, you personally, you're playing a historic role in doing what you're doing? Because you're creating a forum for these ideas to spread. You're putting ideas, because of the infrastructure you've created, you're putting ideas into, how many followers do you have? About 100, 200,000? We got about 1,070,000 as per the time of making this video.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So this video will be seen by a lot of people.
Yeah. So are you aware? Is it sort of sunk in emotionally that you're providing a forum that's influencing history? Because that's what you're doing.
It's occurred to me lately that we are prosumers in this, in our evolution now, that we are playing an active role in determining what happens in some way, shape, or form, if only marginally compared to channels that are much bigger and bigger platforms. But, I think that these are existential questions. And as a prepper, I'm also trying to bring more intellectuals like yourself into this realm of things, because I see just this collective move towards what I think is a Terran, people are starting to get scared, right? It's like technology is starting to scare a lot of people, because as we go into the cities and we become more urbanized, we have to necessarily shed that part of ourselves that had those survival skills, how to live off the land. And people are having this realization now, and I think in light of COVID, people realize, wow, if things were to happen today, I would be, if this whole grid collapsed for some reason, that I would be helpless. And, I think this emergence of AI, I always call it the SHTF wild card, the shit hits the fan wild card, because, there's a possibility that, this plays into those fears somehow. Maybe it's going to be the thing that saves it. Maybe it's the thing that figures out climate issues and that finds world peace and blah, blah, blah. But, there's a nuclear fusion and we make the Star Trek machine that you talked about and everything is fine. Or, we have to go through this birthing period where there's going to be lots of chaos and catastrophe and gigadeath scenarios, and then maybe on the other side it comes out great. But yeah, it's definitely occurred to me lately that we are playing an active role, and I wanted to bring you on so that people could hear your perspective, because I believe now people are receptive to it, whereas only a fraction maybe of people would have had an interest in this type of thing. But what you're saying makes perfect sense. And it's a shame that, it hasn't got more attention, but I'm hoping that in having you on the channel today, that even more people are going to reach out to you and that you can spread this, I don't know if you want to call it a message, but spread this, keep this conversation going. So to potentially, in having the conversation, we can minimize the risk of such an incident happening. I think if we have an awareness of what's going on, then maybe we can prevent it from happening, right? Like maybe if people are aware that there's this divide, it's a long shot, but you never know, right? So hopefully what we're doing here is going to be constructive.
I'm sort of ambivalent on that.
I am too.
Part of me agrees with what you've just said. On the other hand, there is another hand, and that is, spreading these ideas could very well increase the number of cosmists. They get inspired by, God building, universe, so.
But I think with your perspective, though, and sorry to cut you off, but I think you're almost promoting the Terran view in a way, because you're maybe I'm wrong there, but it seems as though like a person would hear what you're saying and would be alarmed at the thought of AI and then start to resist it more. Do you think, or do you think that people's response will be 50-50?
Well, I do take the view, this decision, sooner or later, humanity has to decide, right? It's a binary decision. We build them or we don't build them. So we have to choose. So personally, I'm torn. I'm Terran, I'm Cosmos, I'm both. But we have to choose. So if you think about it, if I choose Cosmist, that means I accept the idea, the possibility, that humanity gets wiped out. So to a Terran, that makes me and all Cosmists arch monsters, vermin, to be exterminated, because they're prepared to see the extinction of the human species. They're monsters, right? So the passion level will just be enormous. But we have to choose. It's just the nature of the situation.
Yeah, and even
or we don't build them.
And even the moderates, by that view, would be classed in with the opposing side. So people would say, well, you're on the fence, so you're basically one of them, which kind of already happens.
Yeah, right. So then you start speculating, well, okay, so what are these cosmists? Imagine a large majority of people are Terran, and they start witch hunting the cosmists. So what are the cosmists? And especially the cosmist elite, what are they going to do? So I suspect they will go into a conspiracy. They will go underground. They will form secret organizations and go ahead with the building of the Artalex. And so the level of paranoia amongst the Terrans will be even greater, and hence the war even more likely. So, the last 10 years or so, I find this Cosmos Terran business so horrible that in some ways I try not to think about it. So I do other things, like I make these master's and PhD level YouTube video courses in math and physics, and I've not been giving much attention to this Artalex war thing. But that's now, as of a few months, because of ChatGPT, that's all changed. And now it sort of, I don't know if you've heard the expression, it took him 20 years to become an overnight sensation. Mm-hmm. Right? I feel a bit like that.
Yeah.
So, I read the book Artalex War, 98? So it's 25 years, it's a quarter of a century ago. And it's been largely ignored because most people just took it as science fiction. They didn't take it seriously. And it's only now, with the rise of ChatGPT and the fact that it's reached human level intelligence in terms of essay writing and synthetic creation of images, and pretty soon, a year or so, whole movies and so on, people are forced to pay attention to it. Their ears are pricking. Oh my God, this is amazing. And so they're now starting to take seriously the idea of the intellect war or species dominance debate. The debate, thanks to efforts like you and recently Brian Rose of London Real and so forth, the word is really getting out. People will start taking more and more seriously the idea, hey, this issue, species dominance issue, is the most important phenomenon that will occur in global politics this century. It's as important as that. It's about the survival of the human species. What's more important than that? Well, if you're a cosmist, you'll say, well, Artflex. And if you're Terran, you'll say, nothing. Nothing's more important than that. And
what about, I would be remiss to not ask about Elon Musk. Do you think he's a cosmist or a Terran?
I don't know. Ask him. I admire him enormously. I think he's, more than any other individual on the planet, has given humanity hope. Because what's he do? What's his big vision? It's to create, as he said himself many times, is to create a multi-planetary civilization. In other words, imagine there is an intellect war on the Earth, and pretty well all of humanity gets wiped out. Well, if there are human beings elsewhere, then maybe they'll survive. Maybe an asteroid comes in and just, a killer event that just wipes out humanity and all living things if it's big enough. So he wants, a plan B, if you like, for humanity on other planets, and that gives people hope. I mean, you look at the onlookers when one of his rockets goes up. Especially the recent one, the giant rocket, they're hysterical. They're just religious. Oh, wonderful. They have hope. So I admire him for that. Whether he's cosmist or Terran, maybe he's torn the way I am and the way many people. I mean, let me ask you, where are you on this?
Yeah, well, I'll just say before I answer that, I think he really is kind of on the fence, because on the one hand, he's bringing forth things like Neuralink, which are obviously cyborg, and he seems, at least on the face of things, to be a cosmist, but he's also promoting in his own politic a lot of Terran-like views as well. Myself, I don't want to fall into the trap of being technophobic and being overly pessimistic. A part of me understands the frailty of human civilization, so that's where I lean towards Terran, hence the prepper aspect of this. That's part of it. You know what? Now that I think about it, when I was first starting to listen to your stuff back in 2008, I guess, that's when I first started to become preparedness minded. Maybe that's what somewhat co-constructed my more pessimistic view of things. Not saying that that wasn't really a big motivation for it, but technology has always been, I've always viewed it as a double-edged sword, in that there's these great possibilities, but there's also the potential for things to really, really go bad. There's never before been a time when we could destroy ourselves in so many different ways. I mean, AI is just another one of those, that didn't exist 100 years ago, before nuclear war and bioengineering viruses and, messing with our DNA and all these other possible reasons. So I've always been reluctant, hesitant about the unintended consequences of technology. So on the one hand, I'm a bit of both, because I see the potential, but I feel as though maybe we're not mature enough as a species to wield this yet. And thus, I'm leaning towards Terran, but I wouldn't be like an extremist Terran. I think most preppers are going to be like, I'm just getting out of the way. You guys can fight it over. And I'm going to maybe modify myself so to keep pace with society. But I'm not going to be one of these starry-eyed people that, just rolls out the red carpet to the cosmists and the creation of deities and this kind of thing, where I think a lot of people will. We've seen that complacency and groupthink in the last few years. And I believe that will be replicated to some extent, that people are going to, if it's the flavor from the month to be a cosmist, then if that's what's considered woke at that period of time, people will go for it, and they'll say, well, and we're gonna start to hear about robot rights, and I mean, we're already on that path, right, to where the robots are gonna get their own bathrooms, and I don't know, we're gonna get to that point where it's going to be tied into the conversation about AI. Having rights is going to be a thing that I think a lot of people on the progressive end are going to defend. Like, we're going to humanize robots, and we're going to anthropomorphize and all that stuff. So, sorry for the long-winded response. I'm still on the fence. I'm kind of like you, I'm trying to keep my options open. But I know that means that we'll probably be burned at the stake as well. So be it, I guess.
So, well, let me pin you down a little bit more. So, on a scale 0 to 10, how Terranite? So, like, if you say 5, that means you're sort of 50-50 Terran cosmist. So,
5 feels like a cop out. I'm gonna have to say I'm gonna lean towards a 3.5 Terran. Like, if 1 is Terran and 10 is cosmist, I'm gonna be 3.5 right now. And that's largely because there's too many conflicting interests. Like, you have nation states competing, you have individuals competing, then you have corporations competing for AI dominance. All of those potential conflicts, arms races, have the potential to end badly. So for me, at this point in time, I'm more Terran, Yeah. Well, thank you for helping me work that out.
I'm a bit confused. You said 3.5. Don't you mean 6.5?
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like 1 being Terran, 10 being cosmist.
Well, yeah. If you said 0.5, that means you're sort of on the fence.
I'll say 6.5. If you want to leave it. Yeah.
I do think this whole issue needs to go political. So I'm hoping amongst your 1 million or so followers, there are some think tankers, people involved in think tanks for governments, and they take this issue, the whole prospect of an Artilect war, and, species dominance and so forth, take it seriously, and then start doing the hard thinking, and then advising governments, because at the moment it's still fairly fringy, this whole issue. But a couple of years from now, I think governments will come down with their views on what their particular political party is in favour of or against, and so forth. But at the moment, it's still pretty much unformed. It's still too fluid. So the next step in this debate, I think, is making it political. So that there's time for political parties to be formed. But then you could probably argue that if the takeoff is slow, all this forming of political parties is just setting up the infrastructure for the Artilect war. So I am so torn. I mean, it's so easy to argue both. Yeah, it's so easy to argue both ways. Like the forum you've set up, it may have the indirect effect that it increases the number of cosmists. Who knows? I mean, I had huge question marks about the whole thing.
Like you say, it's still a very abstract and vague. It's still too opaque for people to really grab onto and feel the imminent need to act. But I do believe that day is coming very soon, because what you're saying is inevitable. Perhaps people viewed it too much as a work of fiction, but I do believe that your book will be remembered as very prescient, and that it will get the acclaim it deserves eventually. Unfortunately, it was just too ahead of its time. So I greatly appreciate you coming on today. And is there I would encourage people to go and buy the book. Is it?
Oh, it's free. You don't have to buy it. Just go to my website. Just type in just Google my name, Hugo de Garis, and maybe another keyword, website, and then you can just download the whole book for free.
Perfect.
So you don't have to pay for it. Yeah. And I do that deliberately, because that way I get hugely more hits on it than if people have to buy it.
Is there an audiobook version for people?
No. Oh, no. Yes. Sorry, I forgot. Yes, there is. I read it aloud, and I filmed it, and you can just watch me reading it aloud. Many videos, of course, because it's a 200-page book or whatever. Yes, there is a book. I'd forgotten about that. I haven't looked at it for a long time.
Well, I encourage people to go and check that out. Go check out his YouTube channel and give this some thought, because this is the future, and it's coming faster than we think, and it is only going to intensify this year, next year. As you say, it's going to keep doubling, and we don't even know what it's going to be like in 5 years. But thank you very much for coming out, Professor, and I hope to see you. I hope to hear you talk on other people's channels in the future, because I enjoy listening to you talk. You do have a knack for this kind of thing. We need good communicators who are passionate and intriguing to listen to, like yourself. So thank you very much for coming on today.
Nate, thank you for providing a forum. You're playing your part in history. But be careful. You may get, if you're too prominent, you may get targeted. So I give you the same kind of warning, friendly warning, as I gave Ben Goertzel. Be careful. Who knows where the situation will be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So because if an atomic war is brewing, the first signs of that I predict will be assassinations and sabotage and arson and so forth. So be careful.
Well, I appreciate that. So Terrans, please don't kill me. All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.